Hallo. Emily always had this magnetic energy, a way of walking into a room and pulling every gaze toward her. She didn't need to try. She was just that kind of woman. I used to admire it. Loved how she could make even a mundane grocery run seem like an adventure. But over the past few months, her glow had started to feel different. Less about us, more about her. Started small. She'd lock her phone screen the second I walked into the room, or she'd laugh at a text and then claim it was her sister. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were expecting our first child, and I chalked her distractedness up to stress or hormones. But then she started going out more often, always under the guise of errands or needing me time. She'd come back looking flushed, her makeup touched up in a way that didn't quite fit a trip to Target. I should have said something earlier, but I didn't. I didn't want to seem paranoid, didn't want to be that guy, the one who accuses his pregnant wife of something without proof. But last Saturday night, she pushed my patience to the edge. We'd planned a quiet evening, just the two of us. She said she wasn't feeling great, so I offered to cook her dinner. She picked at her food, barely touching it, and then dropped a casual, "I'm going to lie down early. Don't wait up." Fine. I settled on the couch with a beer, flipping through the channels, trying not to think about the fact that our evenings together were starting to feel more like obligations than moments. Around 10, I noticed her keys were gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd run out for some ice cream, pregnancy cravings and all. But 2 hours later, there was still no sign of her. She hadn't taken her phone charger either. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from a buddy of mine, Mike. He sent me a picture with no caption, just a photo of Emily, laughing in the dim neon haze of some nightclub, her arms slung around a guy in a leather jacket who wasn't me. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, my grip tightening on the phone. I zoomed in, hoping it wasn't her. But it was. I knew her smile. That damn dress she swore didn't fit her anymore. The little necklace I'd bought her for our last anniversary. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Still nothing. So I did what any man would do. I got in my car and started driving. The city was alive in a way that mocked my mood. Lights flashing, music blaring from open doors of bars and clubs, couples laughing as they strolled the streets. It all felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. But this was mine, and somewhere in the chaos was Emily. The address from Mike's photo wasn't far. A trendy nightclub she'd never mentioned before. I parked around the corner, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Every step toward the entrance felt heavier, my mind cycling through scenarios. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe the guy was just a friend. But then why hadn't she told me? I slipped inside, the bass from the music vibrating through my ribs. It wasn't hard to find her. Emily stood near the bar, her head thrown back in laughter, one hand resting casually on the arm of him. The guy from the photo. Leather jacket. Tall, cocky grin, the kind of guy who probably thought commitment was a brand of cologne. I froze for a moment, every instinct screaming at me to storm over. But I didn't want to make a scene, not yet. Instead, I hung back, watching, my blood boiling with every passing second. She didn't look like the woman I married. The Emily I knew hated places like this. She hated loud music, hated crowds. Yet here she was, blending into this world like she belonged to it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed through the crowd and tapped her shoulder. "Emily?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She spun around, her face a mix of shock and guilt that she tried to mask with an awkward smile. "Oh my god, Yaka. What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I barked, ignoring the curious stares of the people around us. "That's rich. I should be asking you that." Leather jacket straightened, eyeing me like I was the intruder. Emily stepped between us, her hands raised like she was trying to defuse a bomb. "Jake, it's not what it looks like," she started, her voice syrupy sweet but laced with panic. "I was just... Don't..." I cut her off. "Don't insult my intelligence. You're pregnant, Emily. What the hell are you doing here? With him?" I jabbed a finger toward Leather Jacket, who was wisely staying quiet. Her eyes darted around the room, probably looking for an escape route. "It's not. Look, I needed a break. Okay? I was stressed, and I didn't want to bother you. So you thought partying with this clown was a better idea? At that, Leather Jacket finally spoke, his tone dripping with condescension. Hey man, take it easy. She's allowed to have friends. I snapped. You don't get to talk. Sit down. Shut up, and stay out of this. Emily grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Jake, stop. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I hissed, lowering my voice but losing none of the edge. I've been sitting at home, worrying about you, thinking something might have happened. Meanwhile, you're here playing. Whatever the hell this is. She hesitated, and in that moment, I saw it. The crack in her facade. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was caught, and all she cared about was damage control. I leaned in close, my voice a dangerous whisper. You better come clean right now, Emily, because if I find out you're lying about anything, this ends tonight. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she just stared at me, her expression a mix of defiance and fear. I straightened, looking her dead in the eye. Let's go. Now. Without waiting for a response, I turned and headed for the door. I didn't even check to see if she was following. I just knew one thing. If she thought this was over, she was dead wrong. The silence in the car was deafening. Emily sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms crossed and her face set in a mask of defiance. I kept my grip tight on the wheel, my knuckles white with the effort it took to keep from yelling. I didn't say a word as I navigated the dark streets toward home. My head was spinning, replaying the scene at the club over and over. The laughter, the easy way she leaned into that guy, the fact that she wasn't even sorry. She broke first. You're making this into something it's not, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. Am I? I shot back, not taking my eyes off the road, because from where I'm standing, it looks like my pregnant wife was out with another man, lying to my face about where she was. You want to tell me what part of that I'm making up? She sighed, exasperated, like I was the one being unreasonable. I told you, I needed to get out of the house for a bit. I've been stressed, Jake, everything with the pregnancy, and you being so busy with work and, don't. I cut her off, my voice low but firm. Don't you dare try to pin this on me. I work to provide for you, for us, for this baby. Meanwhile, you're out sneaking around with some random guy, and you think I'm the problem? She rolled her eyes, and that's when I saw it. Her complete lack of remorse. It wasn't sneaking around, she muttered. He's just a friend. Someone to talk to. Someone to talk to? I laughed bitterly. Yeah, because clubs are great places for deep, meaningful conversations. Her jaw tightened, and she turned to stare out the window, clearly deciding she was done engaging. But I wasn't finished. What's his name? I demanded. Who? The guy. I snapped. Don't play dumb, Emily. What's his name? She hesitated, and I knew whatever came out of her mouth next would be a lie. Ryan, she said finally, her voice almost too casual. Ryan, I repeated, letting the name hang in the air. And how exactly do you know Ryan? We met at the gym, she said, still looking out the window. A few months ago. I nearly slammed on the brakes. The gym? The gym you stopped going to 3 months ago because, and I quote, pregnancy is exhausting and I'd rather stay home? That gym. She didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. I pulled into our driveway and killed the engine, sitting there for a moment, trying to collect myself. My hands were shaking with a mix of anger and betrayal. Finally, I turned to her. Let me make one thing very clear, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I don't care how stressed you are or how bored you've been. You don't get to lie to me, sneak around behind my back, and then act like you're the victim. We're going to figure this out, but you're going to tell me everything. And if you leave anything out, I swear to God, Emily. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she just got out of the car and walked toward the house, her shoulders squared like she was daring me to stop her. I sat there for a moment watching her, my mind racing. There was more to this. I could feel it. And no matter how much she tried to dodge the truth, I wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time. The moment I walked into the house, Emily was already upstairs. I heard the slam of our bedroom door and the lock clicking into place. The sound reverberated through the silence, igniting my fury even more. She was hiding again, locking herself away instead of facing me. I stood in the entryway for a moment, my thoughts tangled between rage and disbelief. The woman I thought I knew was crumbling before my eyes, and every instinct I had told me this wasn't just a one-off. There was a pattern here, a bigger picture I hadn't pieced together yet. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before following her upstairs. The light was seeping out from under the bedroom door, a shadow of her pacing visible through the crack. I knocked once, hard. "Open the door, Emily," I said, my voice low but commanding. No response. I knocked again, harder this time. "I'm not playing games. Open the damn door." Finally, I heard the click of the lock. She swung the door open, her arms crossed, her face flushed with anger. "What do you want, Jake?" she snapped. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "I want answers, and you're going to give them to me," she scoffed, brushing past me to sit on the edge of the bed. "I already told you everything. You're just blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" I crossed my arms, towering over her. "Then let's go over it again. You're pregnant. You told me you were staying in tonight. Instead, I find out you're at a club, laughing it up with some guy I've never heard of. You lied to me, Emily. Twice." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "I didn't lie," she said through gritted teeth. "I just didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this." "That's not how this works," I shouted, my patience snapping. "You don't get to keep secrets from me and then blame me for finding out." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her usual quick wit failing her for once. I pressed on, taking a step closer. "How long has this been going on?" Her eyes flickered, a flash of something. Fear? Guilt? Before she masked it with anger. "How long has what been going on?" I leaned down, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Don't play dumb. How long have you been meeting Ryan behind my back?" "It's not like that," she said quickly, her voice rising defensively. "He's just someone I talk to. Someone who listens to me. Unlike you." That hit harder than I expected, but I refused to let her turn this around. "You're deflecting."
You want the truth, Emily.
"Why him? What's so special about Ryan?" She stood abruptly, her face inches from mine. "Because he doesn't treat me like I'm some fragile little thing who needs to be coddled all the time. He doesn't make me feel like all I am is a pregnant woman." Her words were like a slap to the face. I stared at her, the weight of her accusation sinking in. "That's what this is about? You're mad because I've been trying to take care of you." She turned away, her arms wrapping around herself defensively. "You wouldn't understand." "Then make me understand," I said, my voice softer now, but no less demanding. "Because right now, all I see is someone who's willing to throw away everything we've built for." "For what?" "Some guy at a bar." Her shoulders tensed, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. But instead of breaking down or admitting the truth, she straightened and turned to face me, her expression icy. "You want to know the truth, Jake? Fine. I went to that club because I needed to feel like me again. Not a wife, not a mother-to-be. Just me. And Ryan gets that. He gets me." The words hung in the air like a punch I hadn't seen coming. For a moment I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at her, this stranger in my wife's skin. Then, finally, I said the only thing I could. "You're going to regret this." She didn't respond. She just stood there, her chin high, daring me to make the next move. The tension in the room was suffocating. Emily's words echoed in my head. "Ryan gets me." It was like a shard of glass lodged in my chest, sharp and relentless. She didn't apologize. She didn't backpedal. She doubled down, standing there with a look that dared me to push further. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. "Let me make something clear," I began, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm not going to let you paint yourself as the victim here. You lied to me. You betrayed my trust. And now you want to act like this is my fault because I care about you? Because I care about this baby?" Her face hardened. "This isn't about the baby, Jake. It's about us. You stopped seeing me a long time ago. I'm just a vessel to you now. Someone carrying your kid. That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard." I snapped, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay composed. "Do you even hear yourself? You're saying this while sneaking out to a club with another man. I'm saying this because it's true. She fired back, her voice sharp and raw. Do you even know how lonely I've been? How isolated? You're either at work or hovering over me, acting like I can't do anything on my own. Ryan reminds me that I'm still a person, that I matter. The mention of his name made my blood boil. Ryan doesn't give a damn about you, Emily. He's a vulture. He saw an opportunity and took it. And you let him. Her lips trembled, but her expression didn't soften. You don't know him. I don't need to know him. I shot back. I know the type. Guys like him don't care about you. They care about the chase, the thrill of stealing someone else's life. And the second things get real, he'll disappear. She shook her head, but I could see the crack in her resolve. Still, she wasn't ready to admit it. You don't know what you're talking about, she said quietly, her voice lacking its earlier bite. I stepped closer, my tone dropping. Do you love him? Her eyes widened slightly, and for a brief moment, I thought she might crumble. But then she straightened, her walls slamming back into place. It's not about love. That was all I needed to hear. So it's not about love. It's not about the baby. It's not about us. What is it about, Emily? Huh? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just trying to blow up your life for no damn reason. She looked away, her jaw tightening. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I challenged. She didn't respond. The silence stretched between us like a canyon, and I realized she wasn't going to give me an answer. Not now. Maybe not ever. I shook my head, stepping back. You're unbelievable, I muttered, my voice low and bitter. You know what? Fine. If you want to self-destruct, go ahead. But don't expect me to stand here and watch. Her eyes snapped back to me, a flicker of panic flashing across her face. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done chasing you for the truth, I said firmly. You've made your choice, Emily. Now I'm making mine. I turned on my heel and walked out of the bedroom, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. Downstairs, I grabbed my jacket and keys, my hands trembling as I tried to process what had just happened. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I realized something. This wasn't just about her betrayal. This was about respect, about boundaries, about the life we were supposed to be building together. And right now, she was tearing it all apart. The drive felt endless, even though I didn't have a destination. I just needed to get away, to clear my head before I said something I couldn't take back. The streets were quiet, the faint glow of streetlights washing over the hood of my car. My mind, however, was anything but silent. Emily's words kept replaying in my head, each one a dagger twisting deeper. It's not about love. What the hell was it about? Then, her need for attention, validation, the life we'd built together clearly wasn't enough for her. And that realization was suffocating. I pulled into an empty parking lot and killed the engine. For a while, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, my thoughts a chaotic mess. I couldn't go back home, not yet. Not until I had some semblance of control over the storm raging inside me. And then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, half expecting it to be Emily. But it wasn't. It was Mike. I hesitated before answering. Part of me didn't want to talk to anyone right now. But Mike had been the one to send me the picture that unraveled everything. Maybe he had more to say. Yeah, I said, my voice rough from hours of silence. Jake, he said quickly, his tone urgent. Man, I've been trying to reach you. You're not going to believe this. What is it? I asked, my heart sinking. I was at the club earlier, same one where I saw Emily, and I overheard some stuff, he said, his voice dropping. That guy she was with? Ryan? He's been bragging about her, like to everyone, saying crap like, oh yeah, she's married, but she's mine now. My grip on the phone tightened. What else? Apparently, this isn't the first time he's pulled this stunt, Mike continued. There's a group of US who hang out at the same places, and I've heard rumors about him before. He goes after women who are married or taken. He gets off on it, man, like it's some kind of game to him. The blood drained from my face. A game. My marriage, my unborn child, my entire life. Just another notch on this guy's belt. Jake, Mike said after a pause. Are you still there? I'm here, I said through gritted teeth. Anything else? Yeah, he said hesitantly. This is going to sound crazy, but someone mentioned seeing Emily with him before, like months ago, at another bar. They didn't know her name, but the description matches. The pieces were falling into place, each one more devastating than the last. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment bad decision. She'd been seeing him, lying to me, and carrying on behind my back for who knows how long. "Jake, listen," Mike said, his voice softer now. "I don't know what's going on with you two, but you need to figure this out. For your own sanity." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Mike, for telling me." "Of course, man," he said. "You deserve to know the truth." I hung up and sat there in the dark, the phone still clenched in my hand. My breathing was shallow, my chest tight. The rage was back, hotter and more focused this time. Emily had lied to my face, not just once or twice, but over and over. And she'd let me believe I was the problem, that her actions were somehow justified. Meanwhile, this Ryan character was out there, bragging about how he'd sunk his claws into my wife. I started the car, the engine roaring to life. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my mind was made up. Emily wanted to keep secrets? Fine. But I wasn't playing blind anymore. When I walked into the house, she was sitting on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked up as I entered, her face pale and her eyes wary. "Where did you go?" she asked softly, but I ignored the question. "We're getting a DNA test," I said flatly, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Her eyes widened, and for the first time all night, I saw real fear in her expression. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me," I said, standing tall and unflinching. "Tomorrow we're scheduling a DNA test. I want to know if this baby is mine." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing to say, and that silence told me more than I ever wanted to know. Emily stared at me, her face a kaleidoscope of emotions. Fear, shock, and something that almost looked like defiance. I stood there, unflinching, my arms crossed, waiting for her to speak. But she didn't. She just sat frozen on the couch, her mouth slightly open, her mind clearly racing. "Well?" I demanded, my voice slicing through the suffocating silence. "Say something, Emily." Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Finally, she managed, You're serious? A DNA test? Jake, you're being ridiculous." "Am I?" I shot back, my tone cold and sharp. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm the only one in this marriage who's taking things seriously. You've been sneaking around, lying to my face, and spending time with a guy who brags about stealing married women. And you want me to just trust you? After all that?" She jumped to her feet, her eyes blazing. "That's not fair," she shouted. "I told you. There's nothing going on between me and Ryan. Do you think I'm stupid?" I snapped, stepping closer. "I've heard the stories. I know what kind of guy he is, and you expect me to believe that you're the one exception? That he just wants to be your friend?" Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "You're twisting everything. He's been there for me when you weren't. And whose fault is that?" I countered, my voice rising. "I've been killing myself trying to take care of you, trying to make sure you're comfortable, that this baby has everything it needs. And while I'm doing that, you're out playing house with some scumbag who sees you as a trophy." She flinched at that, but her defiance didn't waver. "This is insane, Jake. You don't get to demand a DNA test just because you're insecure." "Insecure?" I laughed bitterly. "You think this is about insecurity? This is about the fact that I can't trust a word out of your mouth anymore. Emily, you've lied to me so many times. I don't even know who you are." Her face crumpled for a moment, and I thought she might finally break. But instead, she doubled down, her voice trembling with anger. "You're doing this to punish me, aren't you? You don't care about the truth. You just want to make me feel small." I shook my head, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice quieter now but no less intense. "You think I want this? That I want to be in this position? I never asked for any of this, Emily. But here we are. And if you think I'm going to raise a child that might not even be mine without knowing the truth, then you're delusional." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel the usual pang of guilt. Not this time. This time, I felt nothing but cold resolve. Fine, she said finally, her voice breaking. You want a DNA test? Go ahead. But don't expect me to forgive you for this. I leaned in close, my voice barely above a whisper. Forgive me? You're the one who blew up our marriage, Emily. You're the one who lied. So don't you dare stand there and act like you're the victim. She turned away, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. You've already made up your mind about me, she muttered. What's the point? The point, I said, my voice steady, is the truth. Something you seem to have forgotten how to tell. Without another word, I walked out of the living room and headed upstairs. I needed space, needed time to think. But as I closed the bedroom door behind me, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever Emily was hiding, it was bigger than I'd imagined. And I wasn't stopping until I uncovered all of it. The next morning was eerily quiet. Emily hadn't come to bed, and I hadn't gone looking for her. We were both orbiting the house like strangers, each of us waiting for the other to make the first move. I was sipping my coffee, staring blankly out the kitchen window, when she finally appeared. Her hair was a mess, her face pale, and the dark circles under her eyes told me she hadn't slept either. But instead of looking defeated, she looked ready, like she had something to prove. We need to talk, she said, her voice flat. I put the coffee cup down slowly. Finally, I've been waiting for you to start being honest. She ignored the jab and sat down across from me at the table. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just picked at the hem of her sweatshirt. Then she looked up, her eyes sharp and guarded. You really think this baby isn't yours? She asked, her tone calm but laced with something venomous. I think I have every reason to ask, I replied. You've been sneaking around for months, Emily. You lied about last night. You lied about Ryan. You've been lying so much I don't even know what's real anymore. So yeah, I want proof. Because I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering if my wife cheated on me and if my kid belongs to some loser with a leather jacket. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a second, I thought she might throw her coffee at me. But instead, she leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. You're so quick to believe the worst about me, she said bitterly. But did it ever cross your mind that maybe you're part of the problem? Here we go, I muttered, rolling my eyes. No, seriously, she pressed. You've been so focused on work, on providing, that you stopped caring about me, about us. You think throwing money at a baby crib or a stroller makes you a good husband. Newsflash, Jake. It doesn't. That's rich, coming from someone who sneaks off to bars and lets another guy put his hands on her. I shot back, my temper flaring. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she glared at me, her voice trembling. I didn't sleep with him. If that's what you're so obsessed with, there it is. I didn't do it. I thought about it. Okay? But I didn't. So congratulations, you win. I'm a horrible person, but I didn't cross that line. Her words hung in the air like a gunshot. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or disgusted. You thought about it? I repeated, my voice heavy with disbelief. And that's supposed to make me feel better? You might as well have done it, Emily. Do you even hear yourself? She stood up abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor. I can't talk to you when you're like this, she said, her voice breaking. You don't even want to hear my side. Your side, I barked, standing as well. Your side is that you've been emotionally cheating on me for months, sneaking around with some guy who preys on married women, and you're mad at me for not understanding? Give me a break, Emily. Her eyes filled with tears, but instead of softening, she doubled down. You want the truth so bad? Fine. I liked the attention, Jake. I liked feeling wanted. Because I sure as hell didn't feel that with you anymore. Happy now. The room went silent. I stared at her, the weight of her words hitting me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about Ryan or the baby. This was about us. About a marriage that had been eroding long before I realized it. I took a step back, running a hand through my hair. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice quieter now. You really don't see what you've done, do you? You don't see how much you've destroyed. She didn't respond. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her arms crossed defensively. Finally, I broke the silence. The DNA test is happening, I said firmly. I don't care how much you cry or yell or try to twist this around on me. If you want me to even consider fixing this, we're doing the test. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked away, defeated. Fine, she whispered. I didn't wait for more. I grabbed my jacket and left the house, slamming the door behind me. Outside, I took a deep breath, the cool air biting against my skin. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss of a life I no longer recognized. But one thing was clear. This wasn't the end. Not yet. Not until I knew the truth that I drove aimlessly. My mind a cacophony of rage, confusion, and something else. Something hollow and gnawing at the edges of my resolve. Emily's confession kept playing in my head. I liked the attention. I liked feeling wanted. Those words felt like a second betrayal. Even if she hadn't crossed the physical line, she'd shattered something fundamental between us. How was I supposed to move forward from this? And more importantly, did I even want to? By the time I pulled into a parking lot at a nearby park, the sun was high, casting harsh light on the grim reality of my life. I sat there for a while, staring at nothing, trying to piece together a plan. But before I could collect my thoughts, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something about the timing made me answer. Hello, is this Jake? A man's voice asked, low and almost smug. Yeah, I said warily. Who's this? It's Ryan. My blood went cold. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. What the hell do you want? Relax, man, he said, his tone casual, almost mocking. I thought we should talk. Clear the air. I clenched my jaw, my teeth grinding together. You've got 5 seconds before I hang up. Ryan chuckled, the sound grating on my nerves. You've got some nerve, coming into my territory last night. Emily told me you were intense, but damn, man, you've got to chill. Listen to me, you piece of garbage. I hissed, my voice low and deadly. You don't get to call me and act like you're in control. You've already done enough damage. Damage? He repeated, feigning innocence. Hey, I didn't force Emily to come to me. She made that choice all on her own. Maybe if you'd been giving her what she needed, she wouldn't have looked elsewhere. I saw red. My free hand balled into a fist, slamming against the dashboard. You think this is a game? I barked. You think you're going to walk away from this without consequences? Relax, he said again, his tone maddeningly calm. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Emily's not as innocent as she's letting on. What the hell does that mean? He paused, letting the silence stretch until I thought I might explode. She didn't tell you everything, did she? Spit it out, I growled. Let's just say, he began, his voice dripping with satisfaction. That night at the club wasn't the first time we've spent time together. She's been coming around for months. And trust me, Jake, it wasn't just for conversation. My heart stopped. For a second, I couldn't breathe. You're lying? I said, but my voice cracked, betraying my doubt. Am I? He said smoothly. Think about it. Why else would she be so defensive? Why else would she agree to a DNA test so quickly? She's scared, man. And you should be, too. The line went dead. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind reeling. Was he bluffing? Trying to get in my head? Or was there more to Emily's lies than even she had admitted? One thing was clear. I couldn't trust her. Not anymore. And if there was even a sliver of truth to what Ryan had said, then the DNA test wasn't just necessary. It was the only thing keeping me from walking away entirely. I started the car and headed home, my resolve hardening with every mile. This wasn't just about trust anymore. This was war. And I wasn't going to lose. By the time I got home, the fury that Ryan's call had ignited had settled into something colder, sharper. My thoughts were razor-focused now. Whether he was lying or telling the truth, it didn't matter. What mattered was getting to the bottom of this once and for all. Emily was in the kitchen when I walked in, standing at the counter with a cup of tea, staring out the window like she wasn't sure what world she was living in anymore. She heard me come in but didn't turn around. You've been gone a while, she said quietly, her voice tight with unspoken tension. Had some things to think about, I replied flatly, setting my keys on the counter with a deliberate clink. And I got a call. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't look at me. From who? Ryan, I said, watching her closely. That got her attention. She turned, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and anger. What? You heard me? I said, stepping closer, my voice steady but ice cold. He decided to fill in some of the blanks for me. Said last night wasn't the first time you've met up. That it wasn't just about talking. Care to explain? Her jaw dropped slightly, but she snapped it shut just as quickly. He's lying, she said, shaking her head. He's trying to mess with you, Jake. You can't trust anything he says. Funny? I said, my lips twisting into a bitter smile. That's exactly what he said about you. Her face flushed red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. I can't believe this. You're actually going to take his word over mine. I don't know whose word to take, Emily. I shot back. That's the problem. All I know is that someone's lying to me. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's you. Hell, maybe it's both of you. But the fact that I'm even having this conversation says everything about where we are right now. She set her tea down so hard it sloshed over the side of the mug. This is insane, Jake. I already told you. I didn't cheat on you. I was stupid. Okay? I shouldn't have met up with him. But nothing happened. Nothing happened? I repeated, my voice rising. Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds? You've been sneaking around for months. Lying about where you've been. Hiding things from me. You let another man get close enough to think he has the right to call me and say those things. And you expect me to believe it was nothing? She looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Her hands trembled as she crossed her arms, hugging herself defensively. This is why I agreed to the DNA test, she said finally, her voice breaking. Because I need you to see that this baby is yours. That I'm not lying about that. And what about everything else? I pressed. Are you lying about that, Emily? About what really happened between you and Ryan? About why you needed him in the first place? Her silence was deafening. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. What's the real story, Emily? Because I'm done playing this game. If there's something you're not telling me, now's the time. Otherwise, I'll find out on my own. Her face crumpled for a moment, and I thought she might finally tell me the truth. But then she looked up, her expression hardening again. You already made up your mind, she said bitterly. You don't want the truth. You want to punish me. Well, fine. Do your DNA test. Do whatever you have to do to feel better about yourself. But don't expect me to sit here and grovel while you tear me apart. I stared at her, my chest tight with anger and frustration. You think this is about punishing you? You think I want this? Emily, I want my wife back. I want the woman I married, the woman I trusted. But that woman isn't here anymore. And if you can't tell me why, then maybe she's gone for good. Her lip trembled, and she turned away, her back to me. I waited for her to say something, to fight for us. But she didn't. She just stood there, silent. And in that silence, I realized something. This wasn't just about finding out the truth. It was about deciding what to do with it once I had it. I left the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. Upstairs, I grabbed my phone and made the call. Hi, I said when the receptionist answered. I need to schedule a DNA test. The next few days passed in a haze. Emily and I barely spoke, each interaction strained and clipped, like strangers forced to share a space. She avoided eye contact, and I avoided any temptation to back down. The DNA test was scheduled, and I wasn't giving her an inch. The morning of the appointment, I woke up before dawn, staring at the ceiling, my stomach churning. I'd thought this would bring me clarity, but instead, it felt like standing on the edge of an abyss, not knowing if I'd fall, or if the ground was even real beneath my feet. Emily was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She glanced at me, her face pale and her eyes heavy with exhaustion. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Are you ready? I asked, my tone cold and distant. Her lips tightened. Do I have a choice? You've always had a choice, I said sharply. You just keep making the wrong ones. She flinched but didn't reply. The car ride to the clinic was silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. I kept my hands on the wheel, my jaw clenched, while Emily stared out the window, her arms wrapped around herself. When we arrived, the receptionist was polite but clinical, walking us through the process with the kind of detached professionalism I'd come to expect in these situations. Emily barely spoke, answering questions with a nod or a monosyllable. When it was time for the test, I went first. The technician swabbed the inside of my cheek and labeled the sample with quiet efficiency. Then it was Emily's turn. She sat stiffly in the chair, her hands gripping the armrests like she was bracing for impact. As they swabbed her, I noticed her eyes flicker toward me, a brief flash of something I couldn't place. Regret, fear, anger, maybe all of it. But I didn't meet her gaze. Couldn't. Afterward, we were told the results would take a few days. The wait was both a relief and a torment. It gave me time to prepare for the worst, but also to imagine every possible scenario, each one worse than the last. On the drive home, Emily finally broke the silence. "Do you really think it's not yours?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I don't know what to believe anymore," I said, not taking my eyes off the road. She turned toward me, her voice trembling. "Jake, I know I've screwed up.
I've hurt you.
But this baby, it's yours. I swear." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Swearing doesn't mean much from someone who's been lying to me for months. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought she might start crying. But instead, she straightened in her seat, her tone hardening. "You're so focused on punishing me that you can't see the bigger picture. I messed up, yes, but I'm still here. I'm still trying. And if you can't see that, then maybe this isn't just about me." I slammed on the brakes at a red light, turning to glare at her. "You're still here because you're out of options, Emily. Don't try to spin this like you're some martyr. You didn't come clean because you wanted to. You came clean because you got caught." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her, her face crumpling for a moment before she looked away, her jaw tight. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. I needed space, needed to think without her presence clouding my mind. But as I sat there, staring at the wall, a thought crept into my mind. A dark, insidious thought that refused to let go. What if the baby was mine? What then? Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? And worse, what if it wasn't? For the first time, I realized that no matter what the results said, there was no version of the story where we went back to the way things were. The damage was done, and the clock was ticking down to a decision that would change everything. The notification came 3 days later. I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV, some rerun of a show I wasn't even following flickering on the screen. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and when I glanced at the screen, I saw the email from the clinic. "Your DNA test results are ready." For a moment, I just sat there, my stomach twisting into knots. The weight of everything, the lies, the fights, the endless sleepless nights, pressed down on me. This was it, the moment of truth. And suddenly, I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. But I had no choice. I clicked the email, my hands trembling as the page loaded. Each second felt like an eternity, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. And then the words appeared. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The baby was mine. I stared at the screen, my mind blank, the weight of the confirmation settling over me like a heavy fog. I should have felt relieved, happy even, but instead, all I felt was exhaustion. This wasn't a victory. This was just another layer of complication on top of an already fractured relationship. "Jake!" I looked up to see Emily standing in the doorway, her face pale, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. She must have noticed the email notification on my phone. "Well?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I held her gaze for a long moment before answering. "It's mine." She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath for days. For a moment, her shoulders slumped, relief flooding her features. But then, just as quickly, she seemed to realize that this wasn't the end of the conversation. "And?" she pressed, taking a cautious step forward. "What does that mean? For us?" I stood up, slipping my phone into my pocket, and faced her. "It means the baby is mine," I said, my voice calm but devoid of emotion. "But that's all it means right now." Her face crumpled, but I didn't waver. "Jake," she said, her voice breaking, I know I've done everything wrong,
Økonomi hurt you.
but I swear, I never wanted things to get this far. You just what? I interrupted, my tone sharp. Wanted attention? Wanted someone to tell you how great you are while I was working myself into the ground for our family? You don't get to spin this into some romantic tragedy where you're the victim, Emily. You did this. Not me. Her lips trembled, but she didn't back down. I'm trying, Jake, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm trying to fix this, to fix us. But you've already decided I'm not worth it, haven't you? I stared at her, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. She wasn't entirely wrong. The part of me that had loved her, that had trusted her unconditionally, felt irreparably broken. But another part, the part that had spent years building a life with her, still wanted to believe there was a way back. Finally, I spoke, my voice heavy with exhaustion. If you want to fix this, Emily, you have a lot of work to do. And I mean a lot, because right now, I don't know if I even want to try. Her tears came harder now, her sobs racking her body. But I didn't comfort her. Couldn't. Instead, I turned and headed upstairs, leaving her alone with the weight of her choices. I needed space, time to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. Because while the DNA test had answered one question, it had left 1,000 others hanging in the air. And I wasn't sure either of us was ready to face them. The next few days passed in a strange, hollow rhythm. We existed in the same house but as separate entities. Emily and I barely spoke, the silence thick with words left unsaid. She tried to bridge the gap a few times, small attempts to pull me back in. Do you want me to make dinner tonight? She'd ask tentatively, her voice laced with hope. No, I'd reply, not even looking up. Maybe we could talk later? She tried again one evening. Not tonight. Each time, her face would fall just a little more, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I felt like a dam holding back a flood, every crack threatening to spill over into chaos. But then something happened that made everything worse. It was a Thursday evening when Emily's phone buzzed on the counter. She was upstairs and I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. I glanced at the screen out of instinct. Ryan, we need to talk. My blood turned to ice. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to leave it alone, to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen it. But the bigger part, the part that demanded answers, was already reaching for the phone. The message was on the lock screen, but I knew her passcode. My thumb hesitated for just a second before pressing it in. Her phone unlocked, and I scrolled through her texts, my heart pounding with every message I read. Ryan's texts were damning. Did you tell him everything yet? He doesn't need to know about that night. Don't be stupid. I can't keep covering for you, Em. You're going to blow this up. Each message was worse than the last, and the implications hit me like a punch to the gut. There was more. More lies, more secrets. She hadn't told me the full story, and Ryan, of all people, was calling her out for it. My hands were shaking as I set the phone back down, careful to leave it exactly as I'd found it. I couldn't confront her yet, not until I had a plan. That night, I barely slept. The messages replayed in my mind, each one carving another wound into my trust. Whatever that night was, it was the key. The one thing she hadn't told me, the thing she was still hiding. The next morning, I made a decision. I waited until Emily was in the shower, then grabbed her phone and copied Ryan's number into mine. Felt wrong, invasive, but I didn't care. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd get it another way. I left the house before she even came downstairs, texting Ryan as soon as I was out of sight. Jake. This is Jake. We need to talk. Now. His response came quickly. Ryan, didn't expect to hear from you. What do you want?
Jake, the truth.
Whatever it is you're holding over Emily, I want to know. No more games. The dots blinked for a long time before his reply came through. Ryan, you sure about that? You're not going to like it.
Jake, try me.
The next text came in, and it felt like my world shifted on its axis. Ryan, she slept with me, Jake. She didn't tell you because she doesn't want you to leave. But it happened. More than once. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my vision swam with rage and disbelief. I texted back, my fingers shaking. Jake, prove it. Another pause, and then he sent a photo. It was Emily, in his apartment, wearing nothing but his shirt. I felt like I'd been gutted. My chest tightened, and my breath came in shallow gasps. The truth wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was a fact. Emily had lied. She had cheated. And now there was no denying it. I didn't go home right away. Couldn't. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind a storm of emotions I couldn't control. By the time I walked through the door, Emily was in the living room, her face lighting up with relief when she saw me. "There you are," she said softly. "I was worried." I cut her off, my voice like ice. "Don't. Just don't." She froze, her smile fading as she noticed the look on my face. "We need to talk," I said, pulling out my phone and opening the messages. Her face went pale as I handed it to her, the photo staring back at her like a ghost. "What is this, Emily?" I demanded, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. Emily stared at the phone, her face drained of all color. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked up at me, tears already welling in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. "Say something," I demanded, my voice cold and biting. "Explain this. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me this is fake. Tell me something that makes this picture make sense." Her hands trembled as she set the phone down on the coffee table. She didn't look at me, her gaze fixed on the floor. I can't." The admission was like a bullet to the chest. I felt the air leave my lungs, the final confirmation stealing whatever fragile hope I had left. "You can't," I repeated, my voice flat, hollow. "So it's true? You slept with him?" She nodded, her tears spilling over, her voice barely audible. "Yes." My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair across from her, my head in my hands. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of her crying. But I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't feel anything but anger and betrayal. "How many times?" I asked finally, my voice raw. "Jake, please." "How many times, Emily?" I snapped, looking up to glare at her. She flinched but answered. "Twice." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Twice? Just twice, huh? Like that makes it better." "It was a mistake," she said quickly, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I was lonely and he was there and I wasn't thinking clearly. It didn't mean anything, Jake. It was never about you. I never stopped loving you." "Stop," I said, my voice sharp enough to make her jump. "Don't you dare try to spin this like it was just some stupid accident. You knew what you were doing. You made a choice. Twice. And then you lied to me about it for months." Her sobs grew louder, but I was unmoved. "I didn't want to lose you," she choked out. "I knew I messed up, but I thought if I kept it buried, we could move past it." "Move past it," I repeated, standing up abruptly. "How the hell do you think we move past this, Emily? How do you expect me to look at you, to raise this baby with you, knowing you were with him?" She stood too, her hands reaching out as if to stop me from leaving. "Because I love you, Jake," she cried. "Because we've been through so much and I know I don't deserve it, but I want to fix this. I want us to stay a family." "A family?" I said, laughing bitterly. "You don't get to throw that word around after what you've done. You destroyed our family the second you let him touch you." Her face crumpled, and she sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. But I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. I paced the room, trying to gather my thoughts, to make sense of the whirlwind my life had become. But there was no clarity, no easy answer. Only the undeniable truth staring me in the face. The woman I loved was gone. Finally, I stopped and looked at her. "I can't do this, Emily," I said, my voice steady but filled with finality. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face full of panic. "Jake, please, don't say that. Don't give up on us. We can get through this. We can." "No," I said firmly, cutting her off. "There's no us anymore. You killed it. You killed everything we had when you chose him." She crawled toward me, grabbing my hand, her tears falling freely. "Don't leave me," she begged. "Don't leave the baby. I can't do this alone." I pulled my hand away, my heart breaking all over again. "You should have thought about that before," I said quietly. "Before him, before the lies. You made this bed, Emily. Now you have to lie in it. I turned and walked toward the door, ignoring her desperate cries behind me. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap to the face. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, my mind racing. I knew there was no going back now. This was the end of us. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of me finding myself again. Bye-bye.